The dust cloud rose behind the stagecoach like a funeral shroud, and when it cleared, Sarah Wilson stood alone on the dirt road leading into Shoshone, Wyoming, her dress torn from shoulder to hem, her face streaked with dirt and tears, clutching nothing but a small cloth bag that held even less than it appeared. The stagecoach robbery had happened so fast that Sarah barely had time to scream before the bandits were gone, taking everything of value from every passenger, including the modest trunk that contained her only other dress, her mother's jewelry, and the $50 she had saved over 2 years of working in a Philadelphia factory. The driver, bleeding from a shoulder wound, had insisted on continuing to the nearest town rather than turning back, and when they reached Shoshone, he had apologized profusely but explained he needed to get to a doctor immediately. The other passengers, equally traumatized and robbed, had scattered to find help, leaving Sarah standing in the middle of the main street as the August sun beat down mercilessly on her shoulders. She had been traveling west to take a teaching position in a small settlement beyond the Wind River Range, a job that now seemed impossibly far away. The school board had sent her a modest advance for travel expenses, all of which had been in that stolen trunk. Now she stood with exactly nothing, watching the townspeople go about their business, some glancing at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. Sarah gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward the nearest building that looked official, which turned out to be the general store. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and a portly man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. His expression shifted from welcoming to wary as he took in her appearance. "We do not give credit to strangers," he said before she could speak. "I am not asking for credit," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I was robbed. The stagecoach was held up about 10 miles back. I need to send a telegram to Philadelphia to my aunt. She can wire money, but I need to borrow the cost of the telegram." "I will pay you back as soon as the money arrives." The shopkeeper's expression did not soften. "That is what they all say. There are swindlers coming through here every week with similar stories. I cannot help you, miss." Sarah felt her face flush with humiliation, but before she could respond, a voice from behind her spoke up. "I will cover the cost of the telegram, Mr. Henderson." She turned to see a tall man standing near the door, hat in hand. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and brown hair that needed cutting. His clothes were simple but clean, a work shirt and canvas trousers, boots worn but well-maintained. What struck Sarah most were his eyes, a clear gray that seemed to assess her situation without judgment. "That is not necessary," Sarah said quickly, pride making her spine stiffen despite her desperate circumstances. "It is just a telegram," the man said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "No one should be stranded without a way to reach family. I am Isaac Bradford. I have a ranch about 3 miles from town. Sarah Wilson." She hesitated, then added, "I truly will repay you. I am not a swindler, despite what Mr. Henderson might think." "I never said you were," Isaac replied. He walked to the counter and placed several coins on it. "For the telegram and for a meal at the boarding house, Mrs. Cooper serves a decent lunch." Mr. Henderson swept the coins into his hand with obvious reluctance. "Very well. What is the message, miss?" Sarah dictated a brief telegram to her Aunt Martha, explaining the robbery and asking for funds to be wired to Shoshone. As she spoke, she was acutely aware of Isaac Bradford standing nearby, not hovering exactly, but clearly waiting to ensure she had what she needed. When the telegram was sent, Sarah turned to face him properly. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford. I do not know what I would have done without your help. As soon as my aunt's money arrives, I will repay you." "Where were you heading?" Isaac asked as they stepped back outside into the bright afternoon. To a teaching position in a settlement called Riverbend, beyond the Wind River Range. But now, I do not know if I will be able to get there. The school board sent me an advance that was stolen, and I was supposed to arrive within the week. I fear they will give the position to someone else if I do not arrive on time. Isaac was quiet for a moment, and Sarah had the impression he was carefully considering something. Finally, he said, "Mrs. Cooper's boarding house is respectable. She might let you stay on credit until your aunt's money arrives, especially if I vouch for you. But I have to tell you honestly, Miss Wilson, the next stage to Riverbend does not run for another 2 weeks and the fare is not cheap." Sarah's heart sank. 2 weeks would be far too late. The school board had been clear that they needed a teacher immediately, that there were other candidates. She had been so excited about this opportunity, about starting fresh in a new place, about finally having a respectable profession that would allow her some independence. Now it all seemed to be slipping away. "Perhaps I can find work here in Shoshone," she said, trying to sound hopeful rather than desperate, "just until I can earn enough for the stage fare." "What kind of work did you do before teaching?" Isaac asked. "I worked in a textile factory in Philadelphia, but I took classes at night and earned my teaching certificate. I also worked as a seamstress for a time." Isaac nodded slowly. "I might have a solution if you are willing to hear it. It is a bit unusual, but it would solve several problems at once." Sarah looked at him carefully. She barely knew this man, but something in his demeanor suggested he was trustworthy. Still, she was alone in a strange town, and she had learned early in life that not all men who seemed kind actually were. "What kind of solution?" she asked cautiously. "Let me explain the situation," Isaac said. "I run a cattle ranch that I inherited from my father 2 years ago when he died. My mother passed when I was young, just 10 years old. For the past 2 years, I have been managing the ranch with the help of 2 hired hands, Pete and Sam. They are good men, hard workers, but none of us are much for cooking or maintaining the house. We need someone to help with those domestic tasks. I was in town today specifically to ask around about hiring someone." "You are offering me a position as a housekeeper?" Sarah asked. "Cook and housekeeper, yes. The pay would be fair and room and board included. You would have your own room in the main house, completely private. Pete and Sam sleep in the bunkhouse. You would have your independence, your dignity, and you could save up enough for that stage fare and probably more. If you wanted, you could stay just until you had enough money to continue your journey. Or, if you found the work acceptable, you could stay longer." It was the most Sarah could have hoped for under the circumstances, yet she found herself hesitating. There was something almost too convenient about it, as if Providence had placed this man in the general store at exactly the right moment. "Why are you helping me?" she asked bluntly. Isaac met her gaze directly. "My mother arrived in Wyoming territory with nothing but hope and courage. My father told me stories about how hard those first years were for her, how people looked down on them because they were poor, because they had nothing. He said strangers helped them when they needed it most, and that we should always pay that kindness forward. I see you standing here in a torn dress, clearly educated and respectable, brought low by circumstances beyond your control. How could I not help?" There was such simple honesty in his words that Sarah felt her suspicions ease. "I accept your offer, Mr. Bradford. And I promise I will work hard to earn my keep." "I have no doubt of that," Isaac said. "But first, we need to do something about your dress. You cannot work in something that is falling apart." Sarah felt her face heat with embarrassment. The torn dress exposed more of her shoulder and one arm than was proper, and the hem had ripped in several places. "I have no money for a new dress. Perhaps I could mend this one." "You could, but you would still only have one dress, and that is not practical for the work you will be doing." Isaac seemed to be thinking something over, and Sarah saw a flicker of emotion cross his face, something like uncertainty or perhaps sadness. "I have something that might work, at least temporarily. Come to the ranch with me and we will sort everything out." Sarah agreed, having little choice in the matter. Isaac had a wagon waiting near the livery stable, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He helped her up onto the seat with the courtesy her own father might have shown, and soon they were heading out of town on a well-worn road that led west toward the mountains. The landscape was stunning in its vast openness. Sarah had grown up in the crowded, sooty streets of Philadelphia, and the sheer space of Wyoming territory took her breath away. Rolling grasslands stretched in every direction, punctuated by rocky outcroppings and stands of cottonwood trees. In the distance, mountains rose purple and magnificent against the brilliant blue sky. "It is beautiful here," Sarah said softly. "It is," Isaac agreed. "Hard land, but beautiful. My father fell in love with it the moment he saw it. He always said it was worth every hardship, every struggle, just to wake up to this view every morning." "What brought your parents here?" "They were from Missouri originally. My father had a small farm there, but when my mother got sick with consumption, the doctor said the dry mountain air might help her. So they sold everything and came west. My mother did get better for a time, lived 10 more years. My father always believed Wyoming saved her, gave them those extra years together." "That is a lovely story," Sarah said, "though I am sorry you lost her so young." "I miss her still," Isaac admitted. "She was kind, always saw the best in people. My father changed after she died, became harder somehow. He loved the ranch, poured all his grief into building it up, but he was never quite the same. When he died 2 years ago from a fall off his horse, I inherited all of it. Sometimes I wonder if he would be proud of what I have done with it, or if he would think I have let him down." "Why would you think that?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a curve in the road. "He always wanted me to marry, start a family, fill the house with children the way he and my mother had hoped to do before she got sick. But I have been so focused on keeping the ranch running, on building up the herd and maintaining the property, that I have not had much time for courting. Not that there are many available women in these parts anyway." Sarah sensed a deep loneliness in Isaac that resonated with her own. "I understand that feeling. Before I decided to become a teacher, I worked in the factory alongside dozens of other women, but I often felt completely alone. Everyone was so focused on survival, on getting through each day, that there was little room for real connection." "Is that why you decided to come west?" "To teach, partly," Sarah admitted, "but also to escape a situation that was becoming untenable. There was a man, the factory foreman, who decided he wanted to court me. I declined his attentions, but he was persistent and increasingly aggressive. He made my life difficult, assigned me the worst tasks, docked my pay for imagined infractions. I realized I needed to leave, to start fresh somewhere he could not find me or hurt me anymore." Isaac's hands tightened on the reins. "I am sorry that happened to you. No woman should have to endure that kind of treatment. Thank you for saying that. Many people, even other women, told me I should have felt flattered by his attention, that I was too particular, too proud. But there was something in his eyes that frightened me." They talked as the wagon rolled on, and Sarah found herself relaxing in Isaac's presence. He was easy to talk to, neither prying into matters that were not his business nor filling every silence with needless chatter. By the time they reached the Bradford ranch, Sarah felt she had known him longer than just a few hours. The ranch was more impressive than she had expected. The main house was a solid two-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. Nearby stood a large barn, a bunkhouse, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals where cattle grazed peacefully. Two men were working near the barn, and they looked up curiously as the wagon approached. Isaac pulled the horses to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help Sarah descend. "Pete, Sam," he called to the two men. "Come meet our new cook and housekeeper." The men approached, removing their hats politely. Pete was older, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent outdoors. Sam was younger, probably around Isaac's age, with red hair and a scattering of freckles across his sunburned nose. "This is Miss Sarah Wilson," Isaac said. "She will be helping us keep the house in order and putting some decent meals on the table. Miss Wilson, these are Pete Garner and Sam Hutchins." "Pleased to meet you, miss," Pete said with a nod. "Welcome to the Bradford Ranch," Sam added with a friendly grin. "Any woman brave enough to cook for us three deserves a medal." Sarah could not help but smile at his easy manner. "I hope I will live up to your expectations, gentlemen." Isaac led Sarah up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was sturdy and functional, but arranged with little thought to comfort or aesthetics. The windows were bare, and dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through. "I know it is not much," Isaac said, sounding almost apologetic. "We have been managing as best we can, but housekeeping is not our strong suit. Let me show you to your room, and then I will get that dress I mentioned." He led her upstairs to a room at the end of the hallway. It was a good size, with a large window overlooking the western pastures, a comfortable-looking bed with a quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small chair in the corner. It was more than Sarah had expected, certainly better than the cramped room she had rented in Philadelphia. "This is lovely," she said sincerely. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Please call me Isaac. We do not stand on formality much out here. I will be back in a moment." He left, and Sarah stood in the middle of the room, trying to process the rapid change in her circumstances. Just hours ago, she had been standing in the street with nothing, and now she had a roof over her head and employment. It seemed almost like a dream. Isaac returned carrying something wrapped in clean white cloth. His expression was serious, almost solemn, as he held it out to her. "I want you to have this. It was my mother's." Sarah carefully unwrapped the cloth and gasped. Inside was a beautiful dress, clearly well made and lovingly preserved. But it was not just any dress. Even her inexperienced eye could tell it was a wedding gown. The fabric was a soft cream color, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, tiny pearl buttons down the front, and careful embroidery at the hem. It was simple in design but exquisite in execution, the kind of dress a woman would treasure her entire life. "I cannot possibly accept this," Sarah said, trying to hand it back. "This is your mother's wedding gown. It must have tremendous sentimental value to you." "It does," Isaac said quietly, "but it has been packed away in a trunk for 15 years, serving no purpose. My mother was a practical woman. She would hate to see it go to waste when someone needs it. You need a dress, Miss Wilson. You need something whole and decent to wear. My mother would have wanted to help you. I know she would have. But surely you are saving it for your future wife," Sarah protested. "I have no prospects for a wife, and even if I did, most women want their own wedding dress, something new. Please take it. Wear it while you are here. Consider it part of your compensation if that makes you feel better about accepting it." Sarah looked down at the beautiful gown in her hands, tears stinging her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her such kindness, such generosity. "I do not know how to thank you adequately," she whispered. No thanks are necessary. Just take good care of it, and maybe someday, if you have a daughter, you can pass it on to her. That is what my mother would have wanted, for it to be used and loved, not hidden away in a trunk. After Isaac left, Sarah carefully tried on the wedding gown. It fit remarkably well, only a bit loose in the waist, which could easily be adjusted with a belt or sash. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the dresser and barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her from a desperate vagrant into someone respectable, someone with dignity. She removed the gown and hung it carefully in the small wardrobe, then used the water in the pitcher on the washstand to clean the dust and grime from her face and hands. Her torn dress would have to do for now, but tomorrow she would wear the wedding gown while she worked, and she would take meticulous care of it. When Sarah came back downstairs, she found Isaac in the kitchen, which was a large room with a cast iron stove, a sturdy table, and open shelves lined with mismatched dishes and supplies. "I thought I could start by making supper," Sarah said, "if you will show me where everything is." "You do not have to start working today," Isaac protested. "You have been through an ordeal, you should rest." "I would rather be busy," Sarah said honestly. "It helps me not to dwell on everything that has happened. Besides, I imagine you and your men are hungry, and I would like to earn my keep starting now." Isaac showed her the pantry, which was reasonably well stocked with basics like flour, salt, dried beans, and preserves. There was a smokehouse out back with cured ham and bacon. The root cellar held potatoes, onions, and carrots. It was more than enough for Sarah to work with. As she began preparing a meal, Isaac lingered in the kitchen, ostensibly to help but mostly just watching her work. Sarah found his presence oddly comforting rather than intrusive. "You really do not have to stay," she told him with a small smile. "I am sure you have ranch work to attend to." "I suppose I do," Isaac admitted, but he seemed reluctant to leave. Finally, he said, "Miss Wilson, I want you to know that you are safe here. Pete and Sam are good men, honorable. They would never bother you or make you uncomfortable, and I give you my word that I will treat you with complete respect. I know you are in a vulnerable position, and I do not want you to feel anxious or afraid." Sarah paused in her work and looked at him directly. "I believe you, Isaac. I do not know why exactly, because my experience has taught me to be wary of trusting people too quickly. But I feel in my bones that you are a good man, and I am grateful to be here." Something in Isaac's expression shifted, a warmth entering his gray eyes. "I am glad you feel that way. And please, if you need anything at all, do not hesitate to ask. I want you to be comfortable here for however long you choose to stay." After Isaac left to finish his day's work, Sarah threw herself into cooking. She made biscuits from scratch, fried thick slices of ham, prepared a pot of beans with onions, and even managed a simple apple cobbler using preserves from the pantry. When she rang the dinner bell that hung near the back door, 3 hungry men appeared within minutes. The look on their faces when they sat down to the meal made all of Sarah's effort worthwhile. Pete actually closed his eyes and sighed contentedly after his first bite of biscuit. Sam declared it the best meal he had eaten in 2 years. Isaac said nothing, but the smile he gave Sarah across the table spoke volumes. After dinner, the men insisted on clearing the table, and Pete even helped Sarah wash the dishes, chatting amiably about the ranch and the area. He told her about the town of Shoshone, which had been established about 15 years earlier and was slowly growing. There was a church, a schoolhouse, several stores, a blacksmith, a doctor, and even a small library. It was a decent community, Pete said, with good people for the most part. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in her new room, Sarah stared up at the ceiling and wondered at the strange turn her life had taken. She had left Philadelphia seeking a teaching position and independence, only to be robbed and left with nothing. Yet somehow she had ended up in a better situation than she could have imagined, working for a kind man who had given her his mother's wedding gown without hesitation. She thought about Isaac, about the quiet sadness she sensed in him, the loneliness that seemed to mirror her own. She thought about his gray eyes and gentle manner, his obvious integrity. She told herself firmly that such thoughts were foolish, that she was here temporarily to earn money for her journey, nothing more. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, it was Isaac's face she saw in her mind. The next morning, Sarah woke early and put on the wedding gown. She felt strange wearing it for housework, but it was the only whole dress she possessed, and she refused to go about in the torn garment she had arrived in. She tied an apron over the gown to protect it and went downstairs to start breakfast. She had coffee brewing and bacon frying when Isaac came into the kitchen, clearly surprised to find her already up and working. He stopped short when he saw her in the wedding gown, and for a long moment he just stared. "It looks even better on you than I imagined," he said finally, his voice slightly rough. "My mother would have been pleased." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I will take very good care of it, I promise." "I hope you do not mind me wearing it for work." "Not at all. That is what I intended. A dress should be worn, not packed away." Over the following days, Sarah settled into a routine at the Bradford ranch. She woke early to prepare breakfast for the men, then spent the mornings cleaning and organizing the house. The afternoons were dedicated to laundry, mending, and preparing the evening meal. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way her factory job had never been. The men were respectful and appreciative, always thanking her for meals and never making demands. Pete often entertained her with stories of his younger days as a scout for wagon trains. Sam was quieter but had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. And Isaac. She found herself looking forward to seeing Isaac at mealtimes, to their conversations that ranged from practical matters about the ranch to deeper discussions about books, ideas, and dreams for the future. She learned that Isaac had attended school through the 8th grade, which was more education than many men in the territory could claim. He loved to read and had a small collection of books that had belonged to his mother. Sarah borrowed them eagerly, thrilled to have access to literature again. One evening, about a week after her arrival, Sarah was sitting on the porch mending one of Pete's shirts when Isaac came to sit beside her. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink, and the air had the pleasant coolness that came with late summer evenings in the mountains. "I received word from town today," Isaac said. "Your aunt's money arrived, $50 sent to you in care of the general store." Sarah's hand stilled on the mending. "That is wonderful news. I can pay you back for the telegram and the meal now." "Consider it a gift," Isaac said. "You have more than earned it with your work this past week. The house has never looked better, and we have eaten better than we have in 2 years. Pete told me this morning that he thinks you are a miracle worker." Sarah smiled at that. "Hardly a miracle, just good cooking and cleaning." "It is more than that," Isaac said quietly. "You have brought life back to this house. Before you came, it was just a place to sleep and eat. Now it feels like a home again." Sarah set down her mending and looked at Isaac. In the fading light, his features were soft, less guarded than usual. "That is a kind thing to say. I have enjoyed being here more than I expected to. You have all made me feel welcome." "I am glad." Isaac was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking about your teaching position in Riverbend. The stage does not run for another week, but even with your aunt's money and what you have earned here, the journey will take most of your funds. You will arrive there with very little margin for error." "I know," Sarah admitted, "but I must try." Teaching is what I trained for, what I want to do with my life. It is important to me. I understand that, but I want to make you a different offer. Stay here permanently. I will pay you a fair wage, more than you would make as a teacher. You would have security, your own room, and you seem to enjoy the work. More than that, I think we all enjoy having you here. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She had been trying not to think about leaving, had been pushing away thoughts of how much she had come to care for this place and these people, especially Isaac. But hearing him ask her to stay brought all those feelings rushing to the surface. I do not know what to say, she said honestly. I am honored by your offer. This past week has been one of the happiest times I can remember, but I also do not want to give up on my dream of teaching just because it is difficult. That is fair, Isaac said. I would not want you to give up on your dreams. But I want you to know the option is here if you want it. You do not have to decide tonight. Take your time, think it over. That night, Sarah lay awake for hours weighing her options. The teaching position in Riverbend had been her goal for months, the light at the end of a very dark tunnel. It represented independence, respectability, a chance to use her education and make a difference in children's lives. But the Bradford ranch had begun to feel like home in a way Philadelphia never had. She felt safe here, valued, content. And if she were being completely honest with herself, she had developed deep feelings for Isaac Bradford, feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, that she was confusing kindness with affection, but she knew better. She found herself watching for Isaac throughout the day, felt her spirits lift when he entered a room, treasured their conversations and the way he really listened when she spoke. She had never felt this way about anyone before, and it both thrilled and terrified her. The question was whether Isaac felt anything similar for her, or if he simply saw her as a useful employee he wanted to keep. She thought she had seen warmth in his eyes sometimes, noticed the way he seemed to linger in the kitchen when she was cooking, how he often sought her out in the evenings. But perhaps she was seeing what she wanted to see rather than what was really there. A few days later, Sarah was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard a commotion near the barn. She looked up to see a rider approaching at full gallop, and even from a distance, she could tell something was wrong. Isaac, Pete, and Sam all ran toward the barn as the rider pulled his horse to a plunging stop. Sarah dropped the laundry basket and hurried over, arriving just as the rider, a young man she recognized from town, was gasping out his message. Stage was robbed again, the young man panted. Same spot as before, about 10 miles out. 2 passengers were shot this time. The sheriff is putting together a posse, asking for volunteers. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. That could have been her if she had left on the stage as originally planned. Isaac's face was grim. How bad are the passengers hurt? One died already. The other might make it if Doc can save him. These bandits are getting bolder, more violent. The sheriff says we need to stop them before they kill again. I will ride with the posse, Isaac said immediately. He looked at Pete and Sam. You two stay here and keep watch. I do not want to leave the ranch completely undefended just in case. Be careful, Pete said, gripping Isaac's shoulder. These men sound dangerous. Isaac nodded and went to saddle his horse. Sarah followed him to the barn, her heart pounding with sudden fear. Please be careful, she said. I know it is necessary, but I worry about you going after armed robbers. Isaac paused in tightening his saddle's cinch and looked at her. I will be careful, I promise. But I have to do this, Sarah. These are the same men who robbed your stage, who took everything you had. They need to be stopped. The use of her first name sent a warm flutter through Sarah's chest despite her worry. I know. I just want you to come back safely. Isaac stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. "I will come back," he said softly. "I have a reason to now." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, he had mounted his horse and was riding off to join the others. She stood watching until he disappeared from view, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart hammered. The next 2 days were among the longest of Sarah's life. She threw herself into work, baking bread, scrubbing floors, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from imagining terrible scenarios. Pete and Sam tried to reassure her, but she could see they were worried too. Isaac was a skilled horseman and a decent shot, but he was not a lawman or a gunfighter. He was a rancher who had inherited his father's dream and worked hard to keep it alive. On the afternoon of the second day, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard horses approaching. She ran to the window and saw the posse returning. She counted the riders frantically, and when she spotted Isaac among them, apparently unharmed, relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees went weak. She met him on the porch, trying to maintain some semblance of propriety but unable to completely hide her emotions. "We got them," Isaac said as he dismounted. He looked exhausted, with dust coating his clothes and dark circles under his eyes. "All 4 of them. They are in the jail now awaiting trial. No one in the posse was seriously hurt." "Thank God," Sarah whispered. Then, without thinking, she stepped forward and embraced him. For a moment, Isaac stood frozen in surprise. Then his arms came around her, holding her close. Sarah knew she should step back, that this was improper and presumptuous, but she could not make herself move. He was safe and whole, and she needed this moment to convince herself it was real. When she finally pulled back, embarrassment flooded her. "I apologize. That was inappropriate of me." "No," Isaac said quickly. "It was not inappropriate at all. Sarah, I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, Pete and Sam came around the corner, greeting Isaac with relief and wanting details about the capture. The moment was broken, and Isaac went with the men to care for his horse and clean up. Sarah returned to the kitchen, her heart still racing, wondering what Isaac had been about to say. That evening at supper, Isaac told them the full story. The posse had tracked the bandits to an abandoned line shack in the foothills. There had been a tense standoff, but ultimately the bandits had surrendered when they realized they were outnumbered. Most of the stolen goods from the various robberies had been recovered, including, Isaac said with a meaningful look at Sarah, a woman's trunk that the sheriff believed belonged to her. "Your trunk," Sarah exclaimed. "Truly. The sheriff will need you to come to town and identify it, but from the description it seems likely. If it is yours, you can have your belongings back." Sarah could hardly believe it. Her clothes, her mother's jewelry, the few personal items she treasured, all might be restored to her. It felt like another unexpected gift from a universe that had recently seemed determined to take everything from her. The next morning, Isaac drove Sarah to town in the wagon. The ride felt different than their first journey together. There was a new awareness between them, an electricity in the air that had not been there before. Sarah caught Isaac glancing at her several times, and each time their eyes met, she felt that flutter in her chest again. At the sheriff's office, Sarah identified her trunk and was overjoyed to find most of its contents intact. The $50 was gone, of course, spent by the bandits, but her clothes were there, her mother's jewelry, a few books she treasured, and even the letter from the school board in Riverbend offering her the teaching position. "We cannot return the stolen money," the sheriff said apologetically. "The bandits already spent most of it, but at least you have your personal belongings back." "That is more than I hoped for," Sarah assured him. "Thank you for recovering it." As they loaded the trunk into Isaac's wagon, he said quietly, "You have your things back now. Your other dress, your belongings. You do not have to wear my mother's wedding gown anymore if you do not want to." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "I have grown quite fond of that dress. Would you mind if I continued to wear it at least sometimes?" A smile broke across Isaac's face, transforming it. "I would not mind at all." On the drive back to the ranch, Sarah felt Isaac's tension beside her, as if he were working up the courage to say something. Finally, as they were nearing the ranch, he pulled the wagon to a stop. "Sarah, I need to say this before we get back, while it is just the two of us. I am not good with fancy words or romantic speeches, but I need you to know that I have come to care for you deeply. It started the moment I saw you in that general store, alone and afraid but trying so hard to be brave. Every day since then, my feelings have grown stronger. I do not want you to leave for Riverbend. I want you to stay here, but not as an employee. I want you to stay as my wife if you will have me." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Isaac, I have been feeling the same way. I tried to tell myself it was too soon, that I was confusing gratitude with love, but I know my own heart. I love you. I love your kindness, your integrity, the way you see the best in people. I love the life you have built here and the way you have made me feel safe and valued. Yes, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." Isaac let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for days. He reached out and cupped Sarah's face in his hands, his touch gentle. "I was so afraid you would say no, that you would choose teaching over staying here with me. Teaching was important to me because I wanted purpose and independence," Sarah said. "But I have found both of those things here with you. I can still teach if I want to. There is a schoolhouse in town and perhaps they need a teacher, but mostly I just want to build a life with you." Isaac kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "We should get married soon," Isaac said. "I do not want to wait." "Is that too rushed?" "Not at all," Sarah assured him. "I have no family to invite except my aunt, and she is too far away to travel here, but we could send her a letter letting her know. As for me, I am ready to start our life together as soon as possible." They decided to marry the following Sunday, giving them just over a week to prepare. It was a whirlwind of activity. Sarah sent a joyful letter to her Aunt Martha explaining everything that had happened and her upcoming wedding. She cleaned the ranch house from top to bottom, wanting everything to be perfect. She also went through her recovered trunk and found the dress she had planned to wear for teaching, a simple but pretty day dress in pale blue, which she decided to wear for the wedding. But on the morning of her wedding day, as Sarah was preparing to dress, she looked at the pale blue dress laid out on her bed and then at the wedding gown hanging in the wardrobe. On impulse, she took down the wedding gown and put it on instead. It seemed right, almost faded. This was the dress Isaac had given her when she had nothing. This was the dress his mother had worn to marry the man she loved. It connected Sarah to the history of the Bradford family, to the woman who had first made this ranch a home. When Sarah came downstairs, Isaac was waiting in the parlor with Pete, Sam, and a few neighbors who had come for the ceremony. The minister from the Shoshone church stood ready to perform the service. But when Isaac saw Sarah in his mother's wedding gown, his eyes filled with tears. "You are wearing it," he said softly. "If you do not mind," Sarah replied. "It seemed only fitting. This dress brought us together in a way. It represents the kindness your mother would have shown me, the kindness you did show me. I wanted to honor that." "My mother would have loved you," Isaac said, taking her hands in his. "She would have welcomed you with open arms, and she would have been so happy to see her dress worn on such a joyful occasion." The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Sarah and Isaac spoke their vows with voices that shook with emotion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Sarah with a tenderness that made her heart soar. Pete and Sam cheered, and the neighbors applauded. There was a small celebration afterward with food Sarah had prepared the day before, and their friends and neighbors offered congratulations and gifts, mostly practical items for the household. It was not a grand society wedding like Sarah might have dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. That night, as Sarah and Isaac lay together in the bedroom that was now theirs to share, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. "I was so angry when I was robbed," she told Isaac, curled against his side. "I felt like my whole future had been stolen. I could not imagine anything good coming from such a terrible experience." "But something good did come," Isaac said, stroking her hair. "You came into my life." "I had resigned myself to being alone, to just working the ranch until I grew old. I never expected to find someone like you, someone who makes me laugh, who makes me think, who makes this house feel warm and alive." "I feel the same way," Sarah said. "I thought teaching was my only path to happiness, but I was wrong. This is my path. You are my path. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." In the months that followed, Sarah and Isaac settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Sarah did not give up her dream of teaching entirely. She started a small school on the ranch, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers 2 afternoons a week. It was not the formal teaching position she had originally sought, but it fulfilled her desire to educate and make a difference. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Sarah's organizational skills and careful budgeting helped them expand their herd and make improvements to the property. Isaac relied on her counsel more and more, valuing her intelligence and practical wisdom. By the following spring, Sarah discovered she was expecting their first child. Isaac was overjoyed, already talking about teaching their son or daughter to ride, to love the land the way he did. Sarah shared his excitement but also felt moments of fear, remembering that Isaac's own mother had died young, wondering if childbirth would be as dangerous for her. But when their son was born in late November of 1876, a healthy, squalling baby with his father's gray eyes, Sarah came through the birth strong and well. They named him Matthew Bradford, and Isaac held his son with such wonder and love that Sarah's heart felt too full to contain all her happiness. Life continued its steady rhythm. 2 years later, their daughter Emma was born, and 2 years after that, another son they named Thomas. The house that had once felt empty now rang with children's laughter, with the sounds of a family. Pete and Sam remained with them, becoming beloved uncles to the children. Pete taught Matthew to whittle and told him stories of the old days. Sam had a gift for making the children laugh with his silly faces and jokes. They were family in every way that mattered. Sarah's Aunt Martha finally made the journey west when Matthew was 3 years old, staying for a month and pronouncing herself delighted with Sarah's life and her handsome, kind husband. Before she left, she told Sarah privately that she had been so worried when she received news of the stage robbery, had feared she would never see her niece again. But seeing Sarah now, so happy and settled, surrounded by love, she knew that everything had worked out exactly as it should. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac had a surprise for Sarah. He had hired a photographer from Cheyenne to come to the ranch and take a family portrait. It was an extravagant expense, but Isaac insisted. "I want to capture this," he told Sarah as they posed with their 3 children on the porch of their home. "I want our children and grandchildren to see how happy we were, how much we loved each other." Sarah wore the wedding gown for the portrait, the same dress she had worn when she arrived with nothing, the same dress she had worn to marry Isaac. It was a bit worn now, with a small stain on the hem from where Emma had spilled jam, a tiny tear near the sleeve that Sarah had carefully mended. But it was still beautiful, still precious, a symbol of everything she and Isaac had built together. The years rolled on, bringing challenges and joys in equal measure. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle and their ability to provide for their growing family. There were droughts that tested their resilience. But there were also celebrations, birthdays and holidays filled with warmth and laughter, milestones as each child grew and developed their own personality. Matthew grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved learning and showed an aptitude for numbers that delighted his mother. Emma was adventurous and bold, always climbing trees and trying to ride horses before she was quite old enough. Thomas was the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over arguments between his siblings and showed kindness to every creature he encountered. Sarah continued her small school, and as the community around them grew, more families sent their children to learn from her. Isaac built a small schoolhouse on their property, and Sarah taught there 3 days a week, balancing her roles as teacher, mother, and ranch wife with a grace that amazed her husband. "I do not know how you do it all," Isaac told her one evening as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep. "You teach, you care for our home and our children, you help me manage the ranch, you never seem overwhelmed." "That is because I love it all," Sarah said simply. "Every part of my life brings me joy. There are hard moments, certainly, but the good far outweighs any difficulty. I wake up grateful every single day." When Matthew turned 18 and announced his intention to become a lawyer, Sarah felt pride mixed with melancholy. Her eldest child was preparing to leave for university in Chicago, to build a life beyond the ranch. But she supported his dreams, understanding that sometimes children must forge their own paths. Emma, at 16, was courting a young man from a neighboring ranch, a respectful boy named Daniel whose family were good people. Sarah liked him and could see that Emma was genuinely in love, though she privately hoped her daughter would wait a few more years before marrying. There was time for her to grow and discover herself. Thomas, at 14, showed every sign of following in his father's footsteps, already taking on responsibilities around the ranch, already talking about expanding the herd and improving breeding stock. As Sarah and Isaac entered their middle years, they often reflected on the unlikely way they had come together. Sometimes, sitting on the porch as the sun set over the mountains, Sarah would tell the story to her children, who never tired of hearing it. "I arrived with nothing but a torn dress," she would begin, and her children would settle in to listen. She told them about the stage robbery, about standing alone in Shoshone feeling lost and afraid. She told them about their father's kindness, how he had helped a stranger without hesitation. And she always made sure to tell them about the wedding gown, about the gift that had changed her life. "Your father gave me his mother's most precious possession," Sarah would say. "He did not know me at all, had no reason to trust me or help me. But he did it anyway because he believed in showing kindness to those in need. That is the kind of man your father is, and I hope you will all grow to be like him." Isaac would always look embarrassed when she told the story this way, insisting he had only done what anyone would do. But Sarah knew better. Not everyone would have helped a desperate stranger. Not everyone would have seen past the torn dress and the dire circumstances to the woman underneath who just needed a chance. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Sarah by commissioning a replica of the wedding gown. The original was now carefully preserved in a trunk, too fragile and precious for regular wear. But Isaac wanted Sarah to have a version she could still put on for special occasions. "I will never forget the first time I saw you in this dress," Isaac told her as she modeled the replica. "You looked so beautiful, but more than that, you looked like you belonged here, like you were meant to be part of this family. I fell in love with you that day, though I did not fully realize it at the time. "I fell in love with you the day you helped me in the general store," Sarah confessed. "I knew immediately that you were different, that you were someone special. Even then, I think some part of me knew I would end up staying, that teaching in Riverbend was never actually going to be my destiny." Their children grew and built their own lives. Matthew became a successful lawyer in Denver but visited often, bringing his wife and eventually his own children to stay at the ranch for summers. Emma married Daniel and started a ranch of their own just 5 miles away, close enough that Sarah saw her daughter and grandchildren frequently. Thomas did indeed take over the Bradford ranch when Isaac decided it was time to step back, running it with the same integrity and care his father had shown. Sarah and Isaac grew old together, watching their family expand and flourish. They had 9 grandchildren eventually, and Sarah loved them all fiercely, spoiling them in the way grandmothers do. She continued teaching until she was nearly 60, finally retiring when her knees made standing for long periods too difficult. But even in retirement, she remained active in the community. She helped establish a proper school in Shoshone with a full-time teacher. She organized a library and served on the board of the church. She wrote letters to newspapers advocating for women's rights and suffrage, causing some scandal, but also inspiring many younger women. Isaac supported all of Sarah's endeavors, proud of her intelligence and passion. Their love deepened with each passing year, moving beyond the initial romance into something more profound and enduring. They knew each other completely, finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. They had weathered storms together and celebrated triumphs together, and their bond was unbreakable. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and many friends, Isaac stood to make a toast. 40 years ago, I met a woman in a torn dress who had lost everything," he said. "I gave her my mother's wedding gown because it seemed like the right thing to do, but the truth is, she gave me far more than I ever gave her. She gave me love, partnership, family. She turned this ranch into a real home. She made my life richer and fuller than I ever dreamed possible. Sarah, you are my greatest blessing, and I thank God every day that He brought you to me." Sarah stood and kissed her husband, not caring that all their family and friends were watching. "You saved me," she said softly. "In every way a person can be saved. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They danced that night, moving slowly around the parlor to music played on Emma's piano, their steps in perfect synchronization after so many years together. Their children and grandchildren watched with misty eyes, seeing in their elderly parents the enduring power of true love. Sarah lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in her sleep with Isaac beside her, holding her hand as he had done countless times throughout their life together. Her funeral was attended by nearly everyone in Shoshone and the surrounding ranches. Person after person spoke of her kindness, her intelligence, her generosity. She had taught many of them, had helped others in times of need, had been a pillar of the community. At Sarah's request, she was buried in the replica of the wedding gown, the dress that symbolized the beginning of her greatest adventure. The original gown was given to Emma, who passed it to her own daughter, starting a tradition that would continue for generations. Isaac lived 3 more years after Sarah's death. Years he spent mostly sitting on the porch of the ranch house, looking out at the mountains and remembering. He talked often about Sarah to his grandchildren, making sure they understood what an extraordinary woman she had been. "She arrived with nothing," he would say, "but she left a legacy of love and kindness that will endure long after we are all gone. She taught me that true wealth is not measured in land or cattle, but in the people we love and the lives we touch." When Isaac finally passed at the age of 82, his children buried him next to Sarah on a hill overlooking the ranch. They placed a simple headstone that read, Isaac Bradford and Sarah Wilson Bradford, united by fate, bound by love together for eternity. The ranch remained in the Bradford family for generations. Thomas's son took it over, then his grandson, each one maintaining it with the same care and integrity that Isaac had shown. And in the house, in a place of honor, hung the photograph from Sarah and Isaac's 5th anniversary, the one showing them young and vital, surrounded by their small children, Sarah wearing the wedding gown that had started it all. Their descendants never forgot the story of how it all began, how a desperate woman in a torn dress had been saved by a cowboy's kindness, how a wedding gown had been the bridge between despair and hope. It became the family's founding myth, the story they told their children to teach them about compassion, about seeing the humanity in strangers, about the power of small acts of kindness to change lives. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the mountains glowed purple in the fading light, people swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the pastures, a man and a woman, together still in whatever comes after, their love as enduring as the land itself. The Bradford Ranch became known throughout Wyoming territory, not just for its fine cattle and prosperous operation, but for the love story that had founded it. Young couples would sometimes ride out to see the place where Sarah and Isaac had built their life together, inspired by the tale of how they had found each other against all odds. The wedding gown itself became something of a legend. Emma's daughter wore it at her wedding, as did Emma's granddaughter. Each woman who wore it felt a connection to Sarah, to her courage and resilience. They honored her memory by wearing the dress with gratitude and love, by remembering that life can change in an instant, that kindness can transform everything. The small school Sarah had started grew into a respected institution. Eventually, it was officially named the Sarah Bradford School, and a portrait of her hung in the main classroom. Generations of children learned their letters and numbers under that portrait, and their teachers always made sure to tell them about the remarkable woman who had valued education enough to start teaching in her own home. The community that Sarah and Isaac had been part of building flourished. Shoshone grew from a small frontier town into a prosperous community. The church they had attended was rebuilt twice, each time larger than before. The library Sarah had helped establish expanded into a beautiful building with thousands of books. And through it all, the Bradford family remained central to the community's life, living out the values Sarah and Isaac had embodied. In the decades after their deaths, when people spoke of the old days, of the wild and difficult years when Wyoming was still a territory, they often mentioned Sarah and Isaac as examples of what was best about that time. They represented the courage it took to build a life in an unforgiving land, the importance of community, the power of love to sustain people through hardship. Their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about Sarah arriving with nothing, about Isaac giving her the wedding gown, about how they had built a life together based on mutual respect, love, and shared dreams. These stories shaped the family's identity, gave them a sense of continuity and purpose. The ranch itself stood as a monument to what they had created. The original house was eventually expanded and modernized, but careful attention was paid to preserving its essential character. The porch where Sarah and Isaac had spent so many evenings remained, the barn Isaac had built still stood, and the schoolhouse Sarah had taught in was maintained as a small museum. And every year, on the anniversary of Sarah and Isaac's wedding, The Bradford family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. They would bring out the original wedding gown, now over a century old, and display it carefully for all to see. They would tell the stories again, making sure the youngest generation understood their history. And they would toast Sarah and Isaac, thanking them for the foundation of love and integrity they had laid, a foundation that continued to support the family through changing times. The love story that had begun with a torn dress and a generous gift had created ripples that extended far beyond one couple's happiness. It had built a family, shaped a community, and left a legacy that endured. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Sarah and Isaac had lived every day of their marriage. That love combined with kindness, that compassion paired with commitment, can create something that outlasts any individual life, something that becomes part of the eternal story of human connection and hope. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secure. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for and more than most achieved. The cowboy who had given his mother's wedding gown to a stranger had received in return a lifetime of love, a house full of family, and the satisfaction of knowing he had helped someone when they needed it most. The woman who had arrived with nothing had built everything that mattered. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love that would be remembered and honored for generations to come.